Vashti Hardy was a primary school teacher for several years, and she has a special interest in children's writing, especially free writing, the use of journals and creating fantasy worlds. She left teaching to focus more on her writing and is now also an alumni member and writing buddy of the Golden Egg Academy, a team of publishing and creative writing professionals who provide advice, inspiration and networking opportunities to talented writers for children. Her latest book, Darkwhispers, is a magical fantasy adventure and the second in the Brightstorm series. Vashti talked to Nikki Gamble about her work and the exciting exploits in her new book.
For our listeners, I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about Brightstorm, although I think many of them will know it already, and then where we're going with the second book.
Okay, so the world of Brightstorm imagines a world a little bit like Earth, but different as well. So if you imagine somewhere that feels a little bit Victorian, but technology has gone in a slightly different way, and rather than the explorers exploring in sea ships, they explore in sky ships, and there are lots of places in their world that haven't been discovered yet. So the explorers are the celebrities, I suppose, of their environment, of their world, and you have explorer families that kind of stick together and stand for different values. And in the world of Brightstorm, it starts with Arthur and Maudie Brightstorm, who are twins, and they sadly find out they've lost their dad, who's an explorer, and he's accused of stealing fuel from a rival skyship. So they're left in a sad situation, but also no one believes them when they say that their father wouldn't have done that. So they decide to take it upon themselves to break down the barriers and to follow in his footsteps and find out the truth. So they head south to somewhere that feels a little bit like Antarctica in that world, the frozen south, to try and find the clues and unlock the mystery of what really happened down there, and also to try and be the first to reach the South Polaris of their world. And then that's sort of the Brightstorm story, that's the arc of that. Then Darkwhispers picks up on a new expedition where at the end of Brightstorm, you find out, this isn't really a big spoiler or anything, but you find out there's an explorer that's an eminent explorer in that world. Armitage Wigglesworth has gone missing in the east somewhere. So the Brightstorm crew and other explorers decide to go and have a look in the east for see if they can find where he's gone, what he was up to, what's out there. So there's a lot of mysterious questions and surprises in it.
And there won't be any big spoilers in this podcast, but we will explore the story a little bit too. I wonder if we could just start with the reading of the beginning, just to give a flavour.
Yes, I'd love to. Above an endless ocean, in a place where thoughts faded like the setting sun, there was a far-reaching mist as grey as death's shadow. In the depths below, no fish swam or whales vented, and the seabed remained desolate and hushed as a lost memory. The immense cloud folded and billowed soundlessly, and within the inky gloom, on a craggy island, something waited. They knew that the flash and snarl of skyburn was coming. They could feel it in the prickle of their leathery skin, and every cell of their body could sense the electrical charge building. The darkness was broken by a radiant blaze, and in the blink of an eye, they took flight.
Dun,
dun, dun.
It is dun. Before we get on to thinking about plot and story and those sorts of things, one of the things that really strikes you when you read your books is this wonderful, imaginative world building. Take, for example, the moment where the sky ships take off and the twins' house turns into a sky ship. How important is it to you when you're building a world like this that you can visualise exactly how something is working?
Incredibly for me, because as a child I had, I think a lot of children have this very visual imagination. So if a story was being read, it's a bit like a film in my imagination. I often ask this in school visits, and most children kind of nod along very in agreement with that. So for me, making it real to me as a writer is important, because if I read a fantasy book and I don't feel transported, or I can feel the edges of that world, I feel it's grey, if I don't feel invested in that it's real, it loses me. And I want to be transported in the way that when you read something like the Narnia books, you know, we're all tempted, aren't we, to push the back of the wardrobe occasionally just to see if one day maybe we'll get through, because it feels so real. If we read Harry Potter, we feel like Hogwarts, you know, there's no doubt in any of our minds that Hogwarts does exist somewhere. And that for me is very important, to feel when you're in the pages of that book, you're there. So I want my readers to feel they're with Arthur and Maudie, they're part of the crew, they're having this experience from the inside out rather than being an observer looking down, because then you get to take them on that true ride of emotions and experience that you get through reading a book. So for me, building that is vital.
So take that one instance of this wonderful image of the house taking off, and how you go through the stages of describing that. Is that something that develops exclusively inside your head, or do you actually have to draw it out and make it real in that sense?
I do a variety of things. So one of the things I do, probably not on a scene basis, but on a world basis, is I draw a map first and foremost. Even often before I've written any words, I start to work out what the world is like, and it helps me build the edges, think about the history, think about what the feel is, the climate, and all these little details, the technology, the problems that are going to happen on the way. So maps is important. They're important to me. Pictures, I use an awful lot. So Pinterest is brilliant for me as an author. I have 1,000 boards. I have a board for each project that I work on. Actually, the Brightstorm one is open to anyone to see, so if anyone's interested in having a look,
fantastic,
you can just type in Brightstorm and my name, and I'm sure you can see the pictures that I used. So if I'm writing a scene and there's a picture that evokes it for me, then I will often have that in front of me when I'm writing, and I'll look at maybe the shapes of things and use it to help me immerse myself and describe what it might be like. So with that, the house transforming into a skyship, for me, I imagine as a writer, I put myself there. So I'm with Arthur and Maudie, I'm there seeing it unfold, and the things that I'm thinking that I would notice if I was actually Arthur there, I'm describing those little things, the details that will bring it to life in your imagination. So focus on the details. I use images a lot. Music as well, I use an awful lot. So soundtracks are fantastic to movies, because they take you on that emotional journey. So for the house transformation scene, I would listen to something, sort of a moment from a movie that's the call to adventure moment, that moment of going from the home to the next world, another world, and that the house transformation is that moment of leaving the old behind and moving on to the adventure. So something like the Narnia Voyage of the Dawn Treader soundtrack is great for that, because there's some lovely moments of adventure in the music. So listening to that, it takes me to that place, and it all helps with my description and to get me into the right atmospheric zone.
Fascinating, because it is very filmic. Lots of other things to do with world building, really. Obviously, you have a delight in naming your characters.
Yes.
You must. So let's take Armitage Wrigglesworth first of all.
Yeah.
When you come up with a name, what's that conjuring up for you?
It has to, for me, it has to just sit well with the character's feel and personality a little bit. I try not to be too obvious. I'm not a big fan of having names that are too sort of silly or obvious in that way, but I like them to say something or to feel right. So Armitage Wrigglesworth, to me, it suits his personality. He writes these explorer books about the family, and he's an older character. Armitage to me sounds a bit older. Wrigglesworth, it sounds friendly. He's not going to be too much. It doesn't sound like a bad character. He sounds kind of quite serious, quite respected, quite, like there's history there, and somehow that comes through the name. I think this is something that Dickens did quite a lot. like using double letters in names, it gives it a softness often. So same with Felicity Wiggity. She's a dependable character, someone that will always be there with a cup of tea and a hug should you need it. And her name again, it's got that flow. So Felicity Wiggity, it's got a rhythm. Armitage Wigglesworth, it has a rhythm and a softness and a vibe about it. And sometimes that comes really easily. Like Armitage Wigglesworth just came into my head instantly. So did Felicity Wiggity, actually. They just flew in and I thought, perfect, they suit the characters. Some names I have to work a bit harder for. So Brightstorm is Arthur and Maudie's second name, their surname. Took me a while to get that because I wanted something that was right for them, and the story is about clearing their family name. So it's a very important word. And I knew that, so I was thinking, okay, so their personalities as a family, they're very positive, but they're also very strong and tenacious. So I thought, what if I mix two words? What if I have a positive word and a strong word? So bright, yeah, that kind of fits the bill for a positive word. Storm, that's strong. Together, it just said something about them and about the story, because the story is all about ups and downs, and sometimes things don't go your way, and that's part of life, and part of life is working out how to get through those times. So it fitted well. Eudora Vane, I love
a name that begins with an EU.
Yes, I do. So Eudora, she's what I call her a sugar-coated baddie. So I love the idea of things being complicated. Not necessarily what you see on the outside isn't what you see on the inside with people. So Eudora she embodies this. So she's beautiful, seemingly perfect, but on the inside there's a bit of a black heart. There's stuff going on that's not so nice. So Eudora to me sounds a little bit like adorable. It sounds lovely. So that's like the wolf in sheep's clothing. And Vane, even though it's not spelt like Vane when you look in the mirror, it's spelt like the weather vane, Vane. That alludes to maybe what's really going on. So V's are quite sharp and nice to use for things that maybe and it's got that vein is quite short, snappy. So it works for her. It's a bit of it's got a double-edged sword, I suppose, for her.
So there's meaning and there's the auditory element to it as well. And it's interesting how some names like Culpeper and Smethwick, even though there must be people who have those names today, they can't have disappeared.
Yeah.
And yet they instantly feel like they belong to a different age.
They do, don't they? Yeah, with Culpeper. I wanted something that fitted with the explorer vibe as well, and I was thinking spices and discovery, and that could work. And to me, Harriet is a very good, dependable name, isn't it? So Harriet Culpeper sounded adventurous and explorer-like, and someone that means business that you could rely on. Whereas Smethwick sounds a bit slimy, which he is.
I mean, some of the more difficult things in naming, I think, are the ordinary names, not the kind of elaborate, but when you come up with a hero and a heroine and you give them the names Arthur and Maudie, you're choosing something quite simple, and yet it still has to be right, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. Arthur and Maudie to me feel quite traditional, and timeless, which is nice, and they are, at their essence, they're ordinary children that do something extraordinary, and I love that as an idea anyway. I love the idea of we all feel ordinary at times, yet I believe that everyone's got the capacity to do something extraordinary, whatever your extraordinary is. It might be a small extraordinary, it might be climbing Everest or something big extraordinary, or writing a book, or playing for your local football team, or whatever it is. I like that ordinary achieving extraordinary. So for me, their names kind of say ordinary but extraordinary as well.
Yeah, fantastic. When you are building your world, you do something, I'm going to talk about Philip Pullman here, in as much as I remember when we first read Northern Lights, his Dark Materials, in his world building, how he had this way of taking something that was quite familiar and yet making it seem strange, or even things that really existed, like in the first chapter where they're drinking Tokai, and you think that's kind of fantasy, but it's a real thing. And that happens in your books as well. You take some things that actually are real, but they seem like fantasy. And then you have other things that you feed in, like chimes and uniscope and binoscope, that we kind of know what they are, but you've made them unfamiliar again.
I think it's
so tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's it's a good, a great tool for fantasy writing, to take something that you know the reader is going to pick up on the signals of what's within the word. So uniscope, as an example, we know the words telescope, we know uni on its own, we know what that means. So putting them together, it's not too tricky to work out for the reader without me having to describe it as an authorial voice. You know that that's probably a telescope that they're describing, or a binoscope. We know binoculars, binoscope. You can piece that together. Oh, that's like our binoculars, but it's a slightly different word. So I find it a good way to signal to the reader, you're not on planet Earth here. You're somewhere that is like it, but not. It's a different, an alternative version. Maybe technology's gone in a different way, or things just developed a little bit differently.
I love the chimes in particular. I suppose one of the things that you have to be careful of is not making it too heavy by doing too much of that. It's just dropped in a few places, isn't it?
Yes, it could weigh it down. I think if you do it too much, it becomes, it's just jargon and it has no meaning. So you have to choose carefully what you'd like to maybe twist a little bit and change a little bit, and have a reason for why you're doing it, so it feels like it's a natural part of the story rather than being didactic. None of us want to hear the authors, when we're reading, we don't want to be aware that the author has been there writing the words.
Absolutely. I'm always attracted to food in stories.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. I have to ask you what marsh cake tastes like.
Do you know, I had one today, weirdly, because I went on a school visit and a teacher had made marsh cakes to bring in for the children to have. So in the world of Brightstorm, Felicity Wiggity is the ship's cook, and she likes to experiment and come up with different things, and she's a great cook. So she'll take ingredients from wherever they're exploring. So she uses a pinch of bog herb. So whatever bog herb might be, maybe it's nettles or something like that. I think food is very important because we're daily. It's all part of our lives, so it needs to be, for children especially, what they're going to eat next is very important. Yeah,
and of course marsh cakes is one of those where they can invent. And then we have marchpane. Now that's actually a real thing, though,
yes,
isn't it?
yeah.
I seem to remember that from when I taught the Tudors back in the day.
Yeah, I did a little bit. I like to take things from real life and feed it in because it evokes a bit of an era as well, and because the world of Brightstorm feels old-fashioned and modern, inventive at the same time, those details are quite important to evoke in the reader, that here's a hint at something that maybe sounds a bit old-fashioned, but yeah, just as a reminder.
Well, we've certainly given people a hint of the world that you write about. And as you said at the beginning, this particular story, Darkwhispers, is about the search for Hermitage, Wrigglesworth. But the book itself is called Darkwhispers.
Yes.
Now, what are the Darkwhispers?
Oh, so the Darkwhispers. Now, in the world of Brightstorm, you have creatures that are sapient creatures. And this all stems from me. I'm very fascinated by humans' relationship with the natural world and how we treat animals and how we tend to put ourselves on the top of the pyramid of everything. And I like playing with that, and fantasy is a great place to do it because you can make up your own rules about animals. And I just thought, do you know what if some animals somehow genetically were as intelligent as humans, they can understand humans, and then from that I thought, well, some of these, what if there were, I suppose, like super sapients, so sapient animals that are, maybe in a group that function in a slightly different way. So out of that was born the thought wolves that you get in Brightstorm. So these large creatures that communicate through thought. So when I was writing Darkwhispers, I had this idea. I wanted to take them into the sort of rainforest jungle, and I was imagining what creatures could exist, what new sapience could be discovered. And I was thinking, what if actually these sapients, maybe they're not all good. Maybe there's something dark and dangerous about how they get their energy. Without giving too many spoilers, maybe there's something in how they survive that's nuance, that maybe seems bad, but is it? So the Darkwhispers are super sapient creatures that live in the wide, that the characters come across, and they're quite dangerous and very interesting in how
Why
they
don't
function.
we have a reading where we
Yes,
hear a little bit about them?
let's do that. A strange whispering sound filled the air, a soft hushed murmur. What are they? I can't see. They're everywhere. Look, did you see the size of their claws? There's the shriek of wind, as though something sliced through it at great speed. Arthur pressed his eye to the gap where he could see a narrow section of the scene above. A dark shape circled them, too fast to see. Heads whipped around in all directions, searching frantically. There's something out there! Then he saw it again. Then another, and another. Some sort of flying creatures circled them, their wings slapping through the air like sodden leather.
Oh, well, there's something for you to get your teeth into when you read this
Yes,
story.
so meet the Darkwhispers, and yes, you shall find out some interesting things.
So one of the things that happens in here is that also the discovery of a new place, isn't there? Called
Arethia.
And I wondered, in a sort of novel, albeit fantasy, but a novel that's about exploration and discovery, whether in this day and age it's possible to write about that without all the kind of notions of colonialism.
Yeah,
because actually we discover that this place has been inhabited.
It's a tricky thing to do, and the way that I approached it, and the thing that was important to me, is that it didn't feel like anything that we really have on Earth in our history. So I wanted to invent something that felt like a different type of society in this world that's developed in this place, that doesn't relate to anything that we have in our real world. And I think it was important for me to make that distinction, and make, even in the choice of the language and the naming of it, in fact, I went more towards slightly Latin feeling in the roots of it, because I wanted to come at it from that angle. And hopefully I did an okay job of that, and to come at that technology in a different way and come up with something fresh and different. So I suppose the jungle, the rainforest in Darkwhispers is, I kind of describe it as rainforest plus. So it's rainforest with a big sting in its tail, with a slightly different weather system that's extreme and has impacted on how the people that live there have developed their technology and how they live, in contrast with how maybe the people back in Lontown have developed and how they perceive the outside world, how the people that live in this new place see outside. It's an interesting balance, and I tend to throw a lot of questions out there for, I don't necessarily have the answers, but I'll throw the questions for the readers to consider and think about.
Sometimes it's a single sentence. So in this instance, it's something about, and people did live there, it wasn't uninhabited. And in that one sentence, it says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, because it's, how the people that are exploring there are coming to it, and their expectations, and then how that's upturned a little bit, and Obviously how an explorer like Eudora Vane is going to approach this place is very different to how someone like Harriet Culpeper will approach this place. So there's it's important for me to show that there's good and bad in all sides of how people are doing things and how they're treating exploration, and some of it will echo our history of exploration, because you're going to be coming across different societies as you like spread your wings and explore, and it's how we treat those new experiences and how we live together and are respectful of what we encounter, as well as discovering and learning from each other.
You were a teacher.
I
Primary teacher.
I was.
And I thought it was quite interesting in reading, for example, Welby's instructions to Arthur about how to be a good learner. And also later on where it says the course you take in life, your achievements are what makes you, not some piece of paper. Is this your philosophy of education coming through here?
Yeah, do you know, different things work for different people, I think, and having 3 children of my own, I see that so clearly. My children are very, very different. One, school really, worked for her. My other daughter, dyslexic, auditory processing delay. For her, secondary school was an absolute disaster. It just, the way the setup didn't work for her. And she went through a lot of her time at school feeling like she was lesser, that she wasn't clever. And for me, it's important to acknowledge that learners are different. And so with Arthur and Maudie, like Maudie is very inventive, academic, got a great engineering brain. Arthur's route maybe doesn't lie in that direction, but it doesn't mean that it's any less valid for him. So that's my little nod to kind of saying, do you know what, there isn't necessarily a hierarchy of achievement that puts one above the other. There's space for a big spectrum.
So obviously we don't want to give any plot spoilers here, but I wondered, when you're working on a book like Darkwhispers, how do you go about the plotting process? Is it an idea or a story that comes to you first? Is it a visual image and then you work from that? In other words, how does it all work for you?
I have a combination of it. If I'm planning out a story, I often have an idea of where it's heading. So I will often know the exit feeling, I suppose, or the, what I'm trying to say in a simple way. What I do actually, one of the first things I do, and this could be quite fun to try with children, is I imagine it's a finished book and I write the blurb for it. And that helps me get to the heart of what I'm trying to say, the core of what's important in the story and what's maybe unique about what I'm doing. And if I can't get it right, then I know that something's probably missing, and that if I start writing, I'll probably go down lots of false alleys. And because I'm busy, the more I can sort of refine it early on, the better for me, really, time-wise. So I start sort of back to front in a way. I write the blurb, then I'll do maybe a synopsis and build up from there, then do a chapter outline. Often I'll have scenes in my head that I know have to happen, that'll be very strong, like things with the Darkwhispers, scenes with them, interactions with the characters that I knew had to be there, things at the end that happen, and little plot points on the way when Arthur and Maudie get split up and go their separate ways. So I knew there was this point of them maybe having an issue with each other, a disagreement that would then, when they're split apart, it makes it more meaningful. So then when I'm writing it, I know that I've got to feed these little things in that will build their relationship. So when you hit that point, it's going to have impact. So often when I'm writing, I don't necessarily write front to back either. I might write a scene in the middle, leave out some other bits, and then work out the best way to get there, because you know the threads that you need to put in. So in school, I was saying often with children, we will write front to back. Write a story beginning to end. Actually, maybe try writing a scene that's in the middle, that's an exciting scene, and then look at how you might want to get there, or write the ending, and then think about how does that affect what you would need to do in the beginning in order to reach this place. What do you need to feed in to it?
I'm always fascinated by the bits that people have to take out at the editing process. Is there much of that has to go on?
For me, with mine, because I do quite a good intensive plotting with my editor, I tend to put more in than take it out. We'll have meetings early on, and we sit around a table, and I give them my synopsis, and then we'll look at it and have a nice brainstorm of, maybe this, or we could do that, or how about if we go in that direction? And I scribble, and then I go away and rework on it until we refine it to a place where I'm thinking, yeah, we're good to write now.
That's a nice model that you've described of working that could translate into the classroom very well as well, couldn't it?
It could, definitely.
The idea of bouncing ideas, going away and writing, coming back.
Yeah, we think of writing as being quite a solitary thing, but actually for me it's incredibly collaborative with my agent, with my editor. It's a team effort. You can't know everything yourself as a writer. You need these you can't see everything when you're on the inside. Sometimes it takes an objective eye to point that out, and I think it's important for children to know that.
So as well as being an art, writing is actually a profession. It's a job, and you learn your craft and you get better through doing it. I wonder what you like most about this job of yours, this job of writing.
I love so much about it. I love the creative side of it. I love creation. I love imagining what could be and asking these questions. But I love meeting children. I love school visits. I love getting in, working with children, chatting to them about their ideas. And also I think going and meeting children that have read the books, there's nothing like seeing that spark in the eye when they've been switched on by something, and they look at you with that eagerness and that sort of energy of loving something and going on that journey, and it's priceless to see that. It's really beautiful and important to make those connections.
Now, I've got one thing that I'd like to end with, and I understand that when you were just launching out on your writing career, that a fortune cookie had something to do with this. Tell us that story.
So it was around Chinese New Year time. So I'd been agented for a little while, and it was the second book that I was working on with my agent. The first book, which interestingly is being kind of regenerated now for my next story. So what goes around comes around. But the first book, it was quite high fantasy, quite ambitious for a first novel. So my agent had said, after we'd submitted it to several publishers, had got very close, she said, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm feeling like maybe this isn't your first book. Maybe you should work on something new. And I trust her advice, and I'm in it for the long haul. So for me, I thought, do you know what, that sounds sensible. Had other ideas, so I started working on Brightstorm, finished it, was going out on submission, and it was Chinese New Year time, and had a fortune cookie, opened it, and inside it said, "The tide of change approaches." And I thought, I like this. I'm going to keep that, put it in a little pot on my writing desk. And then the next week I had the call about Brightstorm saying that Scholastic wanted to publish it and they loved it. And so I was like, yes, that is lucky then.
Amazing. So it just so happens that if in this room where we are and we're making this podcast, that I've discovered this golden fortune cookie. And I'm interested to know what it says it has in store.
What could it be? What's the future going to hold? The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams.
That's a nice.
Isn't that poignant? Isn't that so true, though? That, it's so much about belief with your dreams. And one thing I thought is, when I decided to give my writing a good old crack, I thought, do you know what? I thought of myself at the end of my life, and I thought, what would I regret? And I thought, I'll regret not trying. I don't mind failing as long as I've given it everything I've got in order to follow my dreams fearlessly and just go in. You have to take yourself to that place of difficulty in order to grow, don't you? So for me, following your dreams and actually giving it a good go is the most important thing. That's lovely. Follow your dreams, everyone.
Well, Vashti, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Nikki.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to In the Reading Corner with Just Imagine. If you have enjoyed this podcast, you can find many more on the podcast section of our website, justimagine.co.uk, plus via iTunes or SoundCloud or your usual podcast provider. Don't forget to pass the pod and recommend this fantastic free resource to your friends and colleagues.